The war had come, and no one expected it to be so sudden. Earth had never imagined itself in the midst of an intergalactic conflict, but the alien forces had arrived. The skies above were filled with ships, their sleek forms cutting through the atmosphere as if they owned it. Humans, caught by surprise, had to defend their planet against an unknown enemy, one whose power was far beyond anything they had faced before. In the chaos, there was one girl, one alien, who was unlike the rest. While her comrades fought with ruthless efficiency, she stayed behind, tending to the humans she had been captured with. She wasn't just any soldier. She was different in a way that couldn't be ignored. The others saw her as weak, as someone too soft for the war, but her actions spoke louder than any weapon. Her name was Zira. She had been the one to offer food, comfort, and even a strange, quiet companionship to the humans she was supposed to fight against. Over time, I began to notice her more, how she would silently prepare meals for me and the others, each dish a mix of alien ingredients I couldn't recognize. Still, it always tasted better than anything I had ever eaten before. I never understood why she did it, but I never questioned it either. There was something calming about Zara's presence. Despite the alien invasion raging outside, she made the time to care for us, to nourish us. But one night, while we ate our meal in silence, she looked at me differently. She stared into my eyes, her gaze steady and unwavering, and said softly, "Will you marry me?" I almost choked on my food. The words were so unexpected, so out of place, that they took me by surprise. I had always thought of her as a simple cook, a kind soul in a world of chaos. But this was something I never expected. Her proposal wasn't just strange, it was almost heart-wrenching. The war, the invasion, the destruction, all seemed to pale in comparison to her simple question. I had no answer right away, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't understand it. How could someone like her ask a question like that, amidst all this? What did it mean? What did she mean? It was in that moment I realized there was more to this war, more to her, than I could ever have imagined. I had never thought of an alien as someone who could offer warmth, love, or tenderness. I had never thought of them as someone who could feel something like human affection. But now, in the middle of this war, I was faced with an alien girl who had shown me something I hadn't expected. And as she waited for my answer, I couldn't help but wonder, was this a test? Or was it a sign of something deeper, something that could change the very nature of this war? Days passed, and the war outside raged on. But something inside me began to shift. It wasn't just the food or the comfort Zira offered that started to change my view of her. It was the way she looked at me when we shared those quiet moments. I never expected it, but I found myself looking forward to her presence, to her soft, gentle way of speaking, to the small gestures she made that showed care. She wasn't like the other aliens. Most of them saw humans as nothing more than obstacles, beings to be conquered. But Zira, she seemed to see something else. There was a compassion in her eyes, a tenderness that I couldn't ignore. No matter how hard I tried. We talked little, but when we did, it was about the strangest things. Sometimes she would ask about human customs, about what made us laugh, what made us cry. Other times, she would talk about her home, her world, her family. It was in those moments that I realized just how different she was from the others. She was a soldier, yes, but there was something in her heart that refused to accept the war as the only path forward, as much as she might have been trained to fight, to kill. She still held on to something softer, something human. I began to wonder if there was more to her than just the war, more to her than the orders she followed. One evening, after we had eaten, she asked me a question that took me off guard. "Do you ever think about what comes after this?" I had never really thought about it. The war had taken up so much of my attention, so much of my focus, that the idea of life beyond the conflict felt impossible. But Zara, she didn't seem to live for the war. She lived for something else. Something deeper, something that could only be understood by those who had seen the beauty in the chaos. "What do you mean?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I mean," she began, "do you ever think about peace? About a life where there's no war, no death, no destruction?" I couldn't answer her at first. I had never really thought about peace in that way. It seemed like a distant dream, something unreachable. But Zara's eyes, filled with longing and hope, made me realize that maybe, just maybe, peace wasn't as far away as I had thought. Her question lingered in my mind long after she had left. Was it possible? Could there be peace after all this? Was it something worth fighting for? The more I thought about it, the more I understood Zara's position. She wasn't just asking about the end of the war. She was asking about the future, about a life where we could both survive and thrive. It made me think about my own future, one that wasn't bound by war or destruction. Days turned into weeks, and I began to see Zara more clearly. She wasn't just a soldier. She was a person, a being capable of feeling, of dreaming, of hoping for something better. And as we spent more time together, I started to wonder if there was a future for us beyond the war. One evening, as we sat in the quiet of the camp, Zara turned to me again. "Do you still think about my question?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "I do," I said, "but I don't know what the future holds. I don't know what happens after all of this, after the war ends." She smiled softly, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. It wasn't sadness, nor was it joy. It was something more complicated, something deeper. "It's okay," she said, her voice steady and calm. "We'll figure it out together, one day at a time. But right now, we have each other. And that's enough for me." Those words, simple yet profound, made my heart feel heavier and lighter all at once. Zara wasn't asking for promises or guarantees. She wasn't asking for a future that was certain. She was asking for something simpler, something real, and that was more than enough for me. We sat in silence after that, the sounds of the war outside muted by the quiet strength of her words. It was then that I realized how deeply my connection with Zara had grown. She had become more than just an alien to me. She had become someone I couldn't imagine being without. The war continued, but in that moment, it didn't matter. I had found something unexpected in the midst of all the chaos, something I couldn't have planned for, and somehow, I knew that Zara felt the same way. The war outside our small camp raged on with no sign of slowing. Alien ships flew overhead, and the sounds of distant explosions were constant reminders of the chaos surrounding us. But inside the camp, inside the small space where Zara and I spent our days, everything felt different. It was as if we were in our own little world, a world that had no place for the violence and hatred that seemed to define the conflict. Zara's presence became more than just a comfort to me. She had become my anchor in a sea of uncertainty. The more time we spent together, the more I realized how much I had come to rely on her. We spoke less and less about the war itself, and more about the things we wanted for the future. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting an orange glow over the camp, Zara spoke again. "Do you think we'll survive this?" It was a simple question, but one that cut deeper than I expected. I had no real answer. Every day felt like a struggle, every hour uncertain, but I could see the worry in her eyes, and it made me realize that she too was just as unsure as I was. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I want to believe we can. I want to believe that we can make it through all this together." Zara looked away, her gaze focused on the horizon. There was a sadness there, a quiet sorrow that she tried to hide. "I've been trained to fight," she said softly, "to destroy, to conquer, but I don't want that anymore. I just want to live, to be free of this endless violence. Do you ever feel that way?" I nodded. I had always felt the weight of the war on my shoulders, the endless battle for survival, but I had never put it into words. Zara's question forced me to confront the truth. I didn't want to fight anymore either. We sat in silence. For a long time after that, the tension between us thick and heavy. There was something unsaid, something we both understood but didn't know how to address. The war had shaped us both, but it had also opened our eyes to the possibility of a different life, a life without the constant threat of death. But as much as we wanted that future, we both knew it wasn't guaranteed. The war still loomed over us, still threatened to tear everything apart. And yet, in that moment, I couldn't help but believe that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to make it work. Zara's hand found mine, her fingers intertwining with mine in a gesture that felt more intimate than I had expected. I looked at her, and for the first time in a long while, I saw the strength in her eyes. She wasn't just a soldier. She was a person who had dreams and hopes just like me. "We'll find a way," she said, her voice full of determination. "We will survive this, no matter what it takes. And when it's over, we'll have each other. That's all that matters." I believed her, in that moment. I truly did. There was something about Zara that made me feel like everything would be okay, that despite the war, despite the chaos, we would make it through together. But as the night drew on, and the sounds of the war grew louder, I couldn't help but feel a nagging fear deep in my chest. The war had taken so much from us already. Could we really make it to the other side? Could we survive long enough to see peace? Zara squeezed my hand, as if sensing my thoughts. "No matter what happens," she said softly, "we'll face it together. We'll face whatever comes next side by side." And in that moment, I knew. She was right. Together, we could face anything. Together, we could survive the war and whatever came after. The future was uncertain, but with Zara by my side, it felt like it was worth fighting for. The war never stopped, but our connection did. It grew stronger, more undeniable with each passing day. Zara and I were no longer just surviving together. We were living. In our own way, within the chaos. In the moments we shared, we found solace. And that solace was a quiet rebellion against the war. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that felt like enough. But the war, like a storm, was always lurking on the horizon. Each day, the alien forces pressed closer, tightening the noose around us. We could feel the tension building, could hear the distant sounds of battle growing louder. Yet, despite the looming threat, there was something in Zara's eyes, something that refused to give up hope. She cooked for me again, as she always did, her hands moving with a quiet grace as she prepared the meal. This time, there was a sense of urgency in the air. We both knew the war was closing in. "Do you ever wonder," Zara said as she set the plate before me, "if we'll ever have the chance to live without this?" Her question hit me harder than I expected. I had never really thought about it, not in the way she meant. I had always just assumed that once the war was over, we would have a chance to rebuild. But the war wasn't just about survival. It was about the cost of everything we had sacrificed. "I do," I replied, staring down at the food she had made. "I think about it every day. What happens after all this? Will we ever be free of it?" Zara sat beside me, her face solemn. "I don't know," she said quietly, "but I want to believe we can be. I want to believe we can find a way to heal, to find peace." "Do you think that's possible?" I wanted to say yes, wanted to believe it with all my heart, but I couldn't lie. I wasn't sure. The war had taken too much. It had torn apart families, homes, and entire civilizations. It felt impossible to think that anything could be rebuilt after such devastation. "I don't know," I said, my voice low. "It feels like too much has been lost. How do we rebuild from that? How do we find peace when everything is broken?" Zara's eyes met mine, and for a moment, it felt like the weight of the world was in her gaze. "By starting with what we have left," she said softly. "By holding on to each other, by not giving up on the possibility of a future, even when everything seems lost. That's how we rebuild. One step at a time." Her words were simple, yet they carried a weight I couldn't ignore. She wasn't asking for a miracle. She was asking for something more grounded, something we could build together. And somehow, in that moment, I realized that maybe she was right. Maybe that was all we could do. We didn't need to have all the answers. We didn't need to fix everything at once. All we needed was the strength to keep moving forward, to keep holding on to the possibility of something better. Together, later that night, as we lay in the camp under the dim light of the stars, I could feel Zara's hand in mine. The sounds of the war were still there, distant but ever present, but I no longer felt as afraid. I knew that, no matter what happened, we would face it together. We'll make it, I said, my voice firm. We'll survive this. And when it's over, we'll find a way to rebuild. Together, Zara smiled, her expression softening as she squeezed my hand. Together, she echoed, no matter what happens, we'll make it through this. We'll find a way to live, to be free of the war, and we'll do it together. Her words were a promise, one that I held on to tightly. The future was still uncertain, the war still raged on, but in that moment, it felt like we had already won something important. We had found each other, and that was enough. The days blurred together as the war continued to escalate. Every morning brought new challenges, new threats, but in the midst of it all, Zara and I clung to the small moments we shared. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that became our greatest source of strength. One morning, as the sun began to rise, Zara looked out over the horizon, her eyes distant. There was a sadness in her gaze, one I hadn't seen before. "Do you think we'll ever truly be free of this?" she asked softly. I didn't answer right away. I was still trying to process the weight of her question. The war felt endless, the destruction around us overwhelming. How could I even begin to imagine peace when it felt so far out of reach? But Zara had always been different. She refused to accept defeat, even when everything seemed lost. She held on to hope, even when there was little left to hold on to. "I want to believe it's possible," she said quietly, "that we can still find a way out of this. We just have to keep moving forward, no matter how hard it gets." I turned to look at her, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the morning light. There was something in her eyes that made me want to believe her. Despite everything, despite the war, Zara still believed in the possibility of something better. "I think you're right," I said finally. "Maybe that's all we can do, keep moving forward, even when the road ahead is uncertain. As long as we have each other, maybe that's enough." Zara smiled, but there was still a sadness in her eyes. She wasn't just trying to comfort me. She was comforting herself too. She had lived through so much, seen so much destruction, and yet she still held on to the hope that there was something worth fighting for. "I believe in you," she said softly. "I believe in us. We'll get through this together, no matter how long it takes, no matter how hard it gets. We'll survive this, and we'll find a way to build something better afterward." Her words gave me strength, and I could see that they gave her strength too. It wasn't the kind of hope that came from naivety. It was the kind of hope that came from knowing that the only way out of the darkness was to keep moving forward. As the days passed, we grew closer. There was an unspoken understanding between us now. We didn't need to talk about the war all the time. We didn't need to dwell on the uncertainty of the future. We just needed to be there for each other, to remind each other that we weren't alone. But even as we found solace in one another, the war continued to rage. The alien forces were relentless, and every day seemed to bring new threats. We could feel the walls closing in on us, feel the pressure building. It was on one such day, as we prepared for another day of battle, that Zara spoke again. "If we don't make it through this, I want you to know something. I don't regret anything. I don't regret meeting you, or spending this time with you. You've given me something I thought I had lost. Hope." Her words hit me hard. I hadn't realized how much she had come to mean to me until that moment. We had come so far together, Survived so much, and now in the face of all this uncertainty, she was still standing beside me, strong and unwavering. "I don't regret it either," I said quietly. "I don't regret any of this. You've made me believe that we can survive. That there's still something worth fighting for." Zara looked at me then. Her eyes filled with emotion. "No matter what happens," she said, "we've made a difference. We found something real in the midst of all this destruction. And that's something I'll carry with me, no matter where the future takes." U.S. I reached out and took her hand in mine. In that moment, I knew that no matter how the war ended, we had already found something that could never be taken away. We had found each other. The war might have been raging around us, but in that moment, we were free. Free to love, free to dream, free to be who we truly were, beyond the violence and chaos. And that, I realized, was all we needed. The days had become a blur, each one blending into the next. The war had taken everything from us, our homes, our families, our peace. But as we fought back, as we stood side by side, I began to realize something. Zara had become my reason for fighting, not just for survival, but for a future where we could be free of this violence. The enemy was closing in, their forces stronger than we had anticipated. Each day, more of our people fell, more of our soldiers gave their lives, but still, we fought on. Zara fought beside me, her resolve unwavering. She had become not just a warrior, but a symbol of hope. We had lost so much already, but I couldn't lose her. Not now, not when we had come so far. As we prepared for the final battle, the weight of the situation hung heavy on all of us. The enemy was relentless, and our chances of survival were slim. Still, there was a fire in Zara's eyes, a fire that burned brighter than anything else in that moment. "I won't let them take you," I said, my voice low and firm. Zara looked at me, her expression soft. "And I won't let them take you either. We're in this together. We always have been, and we always will be. No matter what happens. I'm not leaving you." Her words filled me with a strength I didn't know I had. I had always believed in survival, in fighting to the end. But now I believed in something more. I believed in us. The battle began at dawn. The sky was thick with smoke, and the sound of weapons firing filled the air. It was chaos, pure and simple. But through it all, I could feel Zara by my side. Her presence, her strength, was a constant reassurance. We were in this together, and nothing would tear us apart. As the battle raged on, I saw the enemy forces beginning to retreat. It was a victory, but it was one that came at a heavy price. We had lost so many of our own, and the war was far from over. But for the first time in what felt like forever, there was hope. We had fought back and we had won. After the battle, when the dust settled and the air grew quiet, I turned to Zara. She was standing beside me, covered in dirt and blood. But there was no fear in her eyes. She had fought with everything she had, and I knew that we had both given our all. "We made it," I said, my voice filled with awe. "We actually made it. We survived this, Zara. We survived it together." Zara smiled, her expression weary but proud. "We did," she said softly. "We fought for each other, and we won for each other. That's what matters. We have each other, and we always will. Nothing can take that away." I reached out, pulling her into a tight embrace. There were no more words left to say. In that moment, I didn't need any. The war had taken so much, but it had also given us something priceless. It had given us each other. As we stood there, together in the aftermath of the battle, I realized that the future was no longer uncertain. It was in our hands now. We had the chance to rebuild, to create something new. And as long as we had each other, nothing could stop us. Zara pulled back slightly, looking up at me with a soft smile. "You know," she said, "this isn't the end. This is just the beginning. We've made it through the hardest part, and now we get to build our future, the one we've dreamed about." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle deep in my chest. We had made it. We had fought for our future, and now it was ours to shape. As we walked away from the battlefield, side by side, I knew that no matter what came next, we would face it together. The war was over, and a new chapter of our lives had just begun. Together. We had survived, and together, we would build a life worth living. The world around us was changing, and so were we. The war was over, but its scars remained. The landscape had been torn apart, cities reduced to rubble, and families shattered. But amid the destruction, there was a glimmer of hope. Zara and I had survived, and now we had the chance to rebuild, to create a future from the ashes of the past. The days following the battle were filled with uncertainty. We didn't know where to begin or what the next step was, but we knew one thing. We had each other. That was enough to give us the strength to keep going. We weren't just survivors anymore. We were pioneers, ready to forge a new path together. Zara and I spent the following weeks working alongside others to help rebuild what had been destroyed. It wasn't easy, and there were many times when the weight of everything felt unbearable. But through it all, we never gave up. We couldn't, not when there was so much at stake, not when we had finally found something worth fighting for. One evening, as the sun began to set and we took a break from the work, Zara sat beside me. Her expression was tired, but there was a peace in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "We've come so far," she said quietly. "I never thought we would make it this far, but here we are, together, with the chance to start over. It feels like a dream." I smiled, reaching out to take her hand. "It's real, Zara. It's real because we made it happen. We fought through everything the universe could throw at us, and we're still standing. Together." Zara's smile softened, her fingers tightening around mine. "Together," she echoed. We didn't talk much after that. Words weren't needed. We had already said everything that needed to be said. The silence between us was filled with a deep understanding. The future was uncertain, but as long as we had each other, I knew we could face anything. In the days that followed, we continued to work on the rebuilding efforts. It was a slow process, but every small step forward felt like a victory. Each brick laid, each new structure that rose from the ground, was a testament to what we had endured and what we had become. We weren't just survivors anymore. We were creators, rebuilding not just the physical world, but the world we had dreamed of. And then one day, as we sat together after another long day of work, Zara turned to me with that familiar look in her eyes. "There's something I've been thinking about," she said softly. I raised an eyebrow, curious. "What's that?" She took a deep breath, as if gathering her thoughts. "I've been thinking about our future, about us, and I realized something. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Her words hit me like a wave, crashing over me with a force I hadn't expected. I had always known that there was something between us, something powerful and real, but hearing her ask me that question was something else entirely. It was everything I had ever wanted, everything I had ever dreamed of. Without hesitation, I took her hand and looked into her eyes. "Yes," I said, my voice full of emotion. "Yes, I will marry you. I can't imagine spending my life with anyone else. You're everything I've ever wanted, and I want to spend the rest of my days with you." Zara smiled, her face lighting up with joy. The relief in her eyes was palpable, and I knew that this was the moment we had both been waiting for. After everything we had been through, after all the pain and loss, we had found each other. We had found love. And now we were going to build a life together. As we sat there, hands clasped, the future felt bright. The war was behind us, and the challenges ahead were ones we would face together. We didn't know what the future held, but we knew that as long as we were together, we could face anything. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more struggles, more obstacles, but with Zara by my side, I knew we could overcome anything. Together, We were unstoppable. Asterisk. The war was over, and the world had changed. No longer defined by conflict, we now had the chance to rebuild, to create something better. The future, once uncertain and filled with despair, now seemed full of possibilities. We stood together at the forefront of that new world, ready to forge a life beyond the devastation. Zara and I had made it through the darkest times. The road had been long and difficult, but it had led us to this moment, to each other. Our bond, formed in the crucible of war, had grown stronger. With each passing day, we had found something worth fighting for, and now, we had found something worth living for. Our days were filled with work, but not in the way they once were. No longer did we fight to survive. Now we fought to build, to create. Together we helped rebuild the cities, the communities, and the lives that had been torn apart by the war. Each step forward felt like a victory, not just for us, but for everyone around us. There were still challenges, still moments when the weight of the past seemed too heavy to bear. But as long as we were together, we knew we could overcome them. Every challenge became a shared experience, every obstacle something to face together. And with each passing day, we grew more confident in the future we were building. Zara and I spent our evenings together, watching the sun set over the horizon. We often talked about the future, about the life we wanted to build. Sometimes we would sit in silence, simply enjoying the peace that had finally settled over the world. The world was still scarred, but it was healing, and so were we. I never thought this would be our life, Zara said one evening, her voice soft. I never thought we would have the chance to be free, to live without the war hanging over us. But now here we are, building something new, a future. Together, I smiled, taking her hand in mine. It's more than I ever imagined, I said, but I couldn't have asked for anything more. I'm right where I want to be, with you. The stars began to appear in the sky above us, the soft glow of the night a reminder of the peace we had fought for. It felt like a dream, a life that had once seemed impossible. But here we were, living it together. We had been through so much. We had fought battles, lost friends, and faced impossible odds. But now, we were no longer defined by those hardships. We were defined by the love we shared, the strength we had found in each other. That was what mattered now. As I looked at Zara, I realized that I had everything I had ever wanted, not in the form of riches or glory, but in the form of a life filled with love, hope, and the promise of a future. We had made it through the darkest of times, and now we had the chance to make something beautiful. We made it, I said softly. We made it through everything, and now we get to live together. We get to live the life we've always dreamed of, and it's just beginning. Zara smiled, her eyes sparkling with the same hope and determination that had first drawn me to her. Yes, she said, it's just the beginning, and as long as we have each other, I know we'll make it. We'll build the life we've always dreamed of, together. And in that moment, I knew she was right. The war was behind us. The past no longer defined us. Our future was ahead of us, and it was ours to create. Together, we would face whatever came next. Knowing that we had already conquered the hardest part, we had found each other in the midst of a war. And now, in the peace that followed, we would create something that was ours, something beautiful. The dawn of a new world had arrived, and it was ours to shape, together.